The courtroom buzzed with the usual tension of a routine morning session. Lawyers flipped through files. The clerk typed away, barely looking up. A few family members whispered to each other in the gallery. Nothing seemed out of place until he walked in. A tall, sharply dressed black man entered the room. His steps were steady, measured. His eyes scanned the space, not nervously, but with quiet awareness. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't looking for attention. He was calm, confident, controlled. But to two white police officers sitting near the front, that calmness was seen as arrogance. His presence? Unfamiliar, unwelcome. As the man walked toward the back row of seats, one officer nudged the other, sneering. Then, just loud enough for others to hear, one of them muttered, "You're in the wrong place, boy." The words sliced through the air like a knife. Conversations halted. The courtroom suddenly went quieter than a church at midnight. A few heads turned, unsure if they'd really heard what they thought they heard. The bailiff glanced up. Even the judge paused briefly in her papers. But the man? He didn't flinch. No anger. No outburst. No dramatic reaction. He just turned his head ever so slightly, looked directly at the officer, then calmly took a seat in the back row, his expression unreadable. It was the kind of stillness that says, "I've been here before, and I know exactly how this plays out." You see, what the officers and almost everyone else in the courtroom didn't know is that this wasn't just any man. He wasn't a defendant. He wasn't a witness. He wasn't a concerned relative or curious bystander. He was Marcus D. Williams, a senior federal prosecutor for the United States Department of Justice, a U.S. attorney with more courtroom experience than anyone else in that room. A man who had put corrupt officials, gang leaders, and white-collar criminals behind bars. But he hadn't come here today wearing that title like a shield. He didn't flash a badge. He didn't announce his position when he entered. He didn't demand respect. He let them judge him first. Judge him by his skin. Judge him by his silence. Judge him by their assumptions. And judge him they did. The officers kept sneering in his direction, whispering to each other. One even chuckled like he'd already won whatever unspoken battle was happening. The judge barely glanced at Marcus, acting as if he were just another observer who might not understand how real courtrooms work. But Marcus stayed seated, observing, listening, taking notes. He was there for a very specific reason. A reason that would soon rock the courtroom. Because this wasn't just any case. The very officers sneering at him were the ones under investigation for a wrongful stop and unlawful search that Marcus himself had experienced just weeks earlier. And now, here he was watching the same justice system that was supposed to protect all Americans reveal exactly who it protects first. No one saw the twist coming. Not the officers. Not the judge. Not the attorneys present in the room. Because in their eyes, Marcus was just another black man sitting in the back of a courtroom. But what they didn't realize, what they never even considered, was that the man they just dismissed was the highest-ranking legal authority in the room. And when he finally stood to speak, the courtroom would never be the same again. Words. A few weeks earlier, the same man, Marcus Williams, as we'll call him, was just finishing a long day at work. He wasn't in a government car. No suit and tie this time. Just jeans, a hoodie, and a quiet drive through mostly white suburban neighborhood outside the city. He often liked to take this route to clear his head before heading home. But on this particular evening, something was different. A pair of headlights began following him. Closer, tighter, aggressive. After a few blocks, the red and blue lights flashed behind him. Pulled over. No explanation. No real cause. Just suspicious driving. He checked the mirrors. No broken taillight. He hadn't been speeding. No illegal turn. Nothing. Still, Marcus calmly pulled over, kept both hands on the steering wheel, and waited. Two white officers approached on either side of the car. Their hands hovered near their belts, one already resting on the grip of his holstered weapon, the other tapping on his radio mic. Calling for backup like this was a felony stop. Marcus rolled down the window slowly and said, "Good evening, officers. Is there a problem?" No answer. Instead, they barked orders. License and registration. Why are you driving through this area? Step out of the vehicle. Marcus, with calm precision, asked the question every citizen has the right to ask. Am I being detained? Or am I free to go? That one line, clear, legal, and polite, seemed to trigger them instantly. The officer's eyes narrowed. The other yanked open the car door. Within seconds, Marcus was pulled out, spun around, and slammed against the hood. The cold metal met his chest, and he felt the sharp sting of the officer's grip as his arms were twisted behind his back. Still, he didn't fight. He didn't panic. He simply said, "You don't have probable cause." The officers didn't respond. They just kept moving, searching the car without a warrant, rifling through his belongings. One officer said, "What are you hiding?" The other mumbled something about fitting the description. But there was no description, no call, no crime, just skin color and silence. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that Marcus Williams wasn't just a random black man in a hoodie. He was a federal U.S. attorney who had spent years prosecuting criminal cases, training law enforcement, and upholding the Constitution they were now casually violating. He knew every legal line they crossed, but he stayed quiet. Not because he was scared, because he wanted them to reveal themselves. He didn't flash his badge. He didn't mention the Department of Justice. He didn't tell them they were being recorded on both their body cams and his own discreet dash cam. He let the system show its true face. After nearly 20 minutes of aggression, baseless accusations, and a complete disregard for protocol, the officers finally backed off. They handed him back his license and said, "You're free to go." No apology. No explanation. Just like that. Marcus got back in his car, took a deep breath, and drove away. But he wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He was ready. Because Marcus knew something they didn't. He wasn't just going to file a complaint. He was going to build a case. And when he walked into that courtroom weeks later, when those same officers saw him again, clean-shaven and suited, sitting in the gallery, they didn't recognize him. They didn't know they were about to face the man they had unlawfully searched. They didn't know the entire stop had been documented. Legally, thoroughly, and undeniably. They didn't know that the system they misused was about to be turned against them. And Marcus? He just waited. Because he knew justice doesn't shout, it arrives. Now, back in that courtroom, Marcus wasn't just another man sitting quietly in the back row. He wasn't there to watch someone else's case. He wasn't a bystander. He was the plaintiff, the man who had filed a civil rights complaint against the two white officers who had unlawfully stopped, searched, and humiliated him just weeks earlier. But here's the twist. He didn't show up in a tailored DOJ suit. He didn't arrive with a legal entourage or flash credentials. He didn't even sit at the plaintiff's table. Instead, he came anonymously, deliberately dressed like an everyday citizen. A modest jacket, no briefcase, no formal announcement. He wanted to see how the justice system treated someone who appeared to have no power, no title, no influence, just their truth. And almost immediately, the courtroom began to show its colors. As soon as the session began, the judge, an older woman with a reputation for moving things quickly, seemed visibly impatient with Marcus's legal representative, a younger civil rights attorney. She cut them off mid-sentence, rolled her eyes, sighed audibly when objections were raised. But when it came time for the officers to speak, suddenly the tone shifted. The courtroom leaned in as the officers shared their rehearsed, vague version of events. The suspect was behaving erratically. We believed we had probable cause, and he fit a description we were given. No details, no evidence, just words. Still, the judge nodded, almost sympathetically. Then, with a hint of irritation in her voice, she looked at Marcus's side and said, "Let's not waste the court's time with baseless claims." These officers acted within protocol. You could see on the faces of the two cops. Smug, smirking, relaxed. They thought they'd won. To them, Marcus was just a nameless black man in the back row. Nothing about his appearance suggested power. No one had introduced him as anything other than a civilian. But then, everything changed. Slowly, Marcus stood up, deliberate, calm, unshaken. He walked forward, each step measured. The room turned its attention to him, unsure what was happening. Even the judge raised an eyebrow, confused by the sudden movement. Marcus cleared his throat and said, in a clear, professional tone, "Your Honor, before this hearing proceeds further, I believe the court should be made aware of a material fact. A pause. The judge blinked. And what fact is that, sir? Marcus looked directly at her, not with arrogance, but with undeniable authority, and said the words that would change the course of that day forever. I am a United States federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice. I oversee civil rights cases, including unlawful search and seizure claims, just like this one. Silence. Total. Complete. Stunning silence. The smirks disappeared. The judge's face turned pale, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. She adjusted her glasses and leaned back in her chair. The officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes wide. Their confidence shattered in an instant. Because now, this wasn't just a routine case. This wasn't just another complaint. This was a high-ranking federal official testifying to the court, not just as a victim, but as a legal authority who had the power, experience, and evidence to back every word he said. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He revealed. The courtroom was no longer in control of the officers or the judge's assumptions. It now belonged to the truth. And in that moment, every person in that room knew. They had misjudged the wrong man. The judge froze. The air in the courtroom went thick, like the oxygen had been pulled from the room. The smirks on the officers' faces vanished in real time. Their smug posture straightened into something stiffer, more uncertain. Their hands, once casually resting on their belts, were now fidgeting nervously in their laps. And the judge, the same one who moments earlier had waved off Marcus's claims as if they were a nuisance, suddenly sat up straighter. Her voice, once curt and dismissive, now came out awkwardly polite. "Mr. Williams," she stammered, "I wasn't aware of your position." But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't gloat. He didn't even look angry. Because this moment wasn't about flexing status or demanding apologies. It was about truth. It was about what happens when assumptions are louder than facts. When a man's skin color speaks louder than his credentials, louder than his voice, louder than his rights. He responded calmly, "I didn't come here to be treated differently because of my job, Your Honor. I came here to be treated fairly, like any other citizen should." The judge swallowed hard. Of course, Mr. Williams. Please proceed." Now the courtroom belonged to him. Marcus reached in his folder and pulled out a USB drive. No dramatic gesture, no raised voice, just precision. "I'd like to submit into the record full body cam and dash cam footage of the incident. It clearly shows the interaction, the lack of probable cause, and the unlawful search conducted by officers Green and Simmons." The footage played on the courtroom screen, and what it revealed was undeniable. Marcus wasn't speeding. He didn't resist. He remained calm, even as he was pulled from his car without justification, slammed onto the hood, and searched like a criminal. The audio captured his exact words. "Am I being detained? Or am I free to go?" The officer's aggressive tone. The unwarranted escalation. The sheer discomfort of watching authority be abused in real time. Every second of it confirmed what Marcus had claimed. The silence in the room was deafening. You could feel the shift, not just in tone, but in power. The same officers who had dominated the room with their presence now sat hunched and rattled. Their once practiced story suddenly full of holes. The judge, now visibly flustered, leaned forward. "Officers Green and Simmons," she said sharply, "you failed to mention the use of force in your testimony. You also claimed there was a call about suspicious activity. Can you produce any record of that?" They couldn't, because it didn't exist. Their story was unraveling, and fast. The judge, grasping the full weight of what had just unfolded, made her next move quickly. "Given this evidence," she said, "I am ordering an immediate inquiry into the conduct of both officers. This court takes constitutional rights seriously, and what I've seen here today is deeply troubling." The murmurs in the gallery were hushed, but you could see the eyes. Wide, blinking, processing. What started as a routine, one-sided hearing had flipped completely. Marcus didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't have to threaten anyone. He just let the truth speak louder than their bias. One moment, he had been just another black man. Invisible, unimportant, easy to dismiss. The next, he was the man who might, in 2 careers and force a department to confront its failures. Not because of his title, but because he knew his worth, and he made them see it. In the days that followed, news of the courtroom moment spread like wildfire. Clips of the hearing circulated online, especially the moment Marcus calmly stood up and revealed who he was, a U.S. federal prosecutor, not just a target of unlawful policing, but a master of the very laws the officers had ignored. But it wasn't the badge that made headlines. It was what Marcus did next. He didn't hold a flashy press conference. He didn't appear on every major talk show, though the invites flooded in. He didn't make it about ego or revenge. Instead, he released a single, heartfelt public statement. A short video. No filters. No podium. Just Marcus sitting on his porch, looking straight into the camera. His voice steady. His tone gentle but firm. "I didn't reveal my position to embarrass anyone," he began. "I revealed it to expose something deeper, something we often pretend isn't there. How quickly people judge based on appearance, not truth." He paused. "Let it sink in. I wanted them to treat me the way they'd treat someone with no power. Because that's how the system really shows its colors." He didn't name the officers. He didn't call for vengeance. What he wanted was change. Marcus spoke not just as a prosecutor, but as a man, as a Black American, as a witness to injustice. The kind that doesn't always make headlines, but happens quietly, daily, in traffic stops, in courtrooms, in glances and glares and assumptions. His words hit home. Within 48 hours, his story had gone viral. Not because of his impressive job title, but because people saw themselves in him. They saw their father, who'd been pulled over for looking out of place. Their teenage son, who'd been stopped for walking too fast or too slow. Their neighbor, co-worker, friend, treated like a threat for simply existing. Marcus became a symbol, not of power, but of poise. He showed the world that you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to humiliate others to reveal the truth. And most importantly, you don't have to wear a badge to deserve respect. Across the country, people were talking, debating, reflecting. Some were inspired. Others were uncomfortable, but no one was unmoved. Police departments quietly reviewed their stop-and-search policies. Community forums sprang up, discussing racial profiling and implicit bias. Law students studied the case as a real-time example of the cracks in the system and how to stand up with dignity. Marcus didn't change the world overnight, but he made it pause. He made it look in the mirror. Because this was never just about one man in one courtroom on one day. This was about every person who's ever been mistreated, dismissed, or dehumanized for how they look, not who they are. Marcus didn't want applause. He wanted awareness. He reminded America of a simple but powerful truth. Justice, he said, should never depend on titles. It should never depend on faces. It should only ever depend on facts. And that truth, it echoed louder than any gavel ever could.